January 16th. It's championship week. Both of us are still alive. I'm back in person, although I did really enjoy talking to you after waking up in Vegas.
It's like a song, isn't it?
It is. Do you know who it's by?
Katy Perry.
There you go. Look at you.
Yeah, I know.
You're not someone that's up on music, given that your favorite band is Whitesnake. But we've got a fun show here, so we're obviously going to talk about the championship games. But there are also a bunch of teams that are not still in the tournament, and they are looking forward to free agency and the draft. And so we're going to talk top 10 free agents, do a little Joe Brady conversation.
Nice.
We're going to talk about the draft, the 2016 draft, and kind of what we can learn maybe from looking back on what might happen this year. And then we're going to get into the championship games, look at whether you want to bet on futures, talk about each game, and then some of the potential Super Bowl matchups. Sound good? Mm-hmm. All right, let's start with this. Top 10 free agents. Does free agency get you excited?
Last year was a lot of fun. You know, it was our first living here and being part of it. And those 3 days of free agency were like bananas.
It's a rush, yeah.
I remember, I grew up a Vikes fan. Not really anymore, but I guess. But I remember being at the Mall of America with my wife in 2013, constantly refreshing my phone to see if the Vikings signed Greg Jennings, and that was, and then I think like 5 years prior to that, it was just refreshing my laptop to see if they signed Bernard Berrien. So there's, it is a fun time, but ultimately what you find out over the course of being an NFL fan for 25 years is that the teams don't win in free agency. It's sort of like a fun time, but hey, look, the Arizona Cardinals got a great signing of Jordan Hicks. It's like,
yeah. Well, this was going to be my next question, because I think about free agency in the NBA as, wow, this is an opportunity to rebuild your team. And I think the reason it works in the NBA is you only have to have 5 players on the floor at a time. So signing 1 or 2 big players can make that big of a difference. But in the NFL, you need, 11. It's 11 on 11. So first off, 1 player isn't going to make that big of a difference. But in particular, 1 player that isn't a quarterback isn't going to make that big of a difference.
There are never quarterbacks available in free agency.
And they're just never available. So to me, NFL free agency is all about not losing, right? Like as long as you don't overspend and just kill yourself, then you'll be okay. But the worst thing you can do is overspend. So I think it'll be interesting to take a look at these top 10 free agents, because a few of them are going to get overspent on, right? Like there's no doubt about it. So let's do it. We're going to do a snake draft.
Okay.
You down with that?
Yep.
That's what we did with the quarterbacks. Let's do that again. So I will give you the first pick. What we're going to do here is we're going to take the free agent kind of agnostic of team that we would most want. And then if you have a team in mind, you can put them on a team.
Perfect. Okay.
You're on the clock. The number 1 free agent selection for you in 2020 is who?
Yeah. So, and I'm firmly of the belief that wide receiver is the most important non-quarterback position on offense, and corner is on defense. And so if I'm a team with a quarterback, and generally I'll be one, right? Then I think that I'm going to go, in this case, with Byron Jones of the Dallas Cowboys.
Interesting. So you're not going quarterback.
I'm kind of assuming a normal situation.
Should we exclude quarterbacks?
Yeah, exclude quarterbacks.
Let's exclude quarterbacks, and then we can come back to the quarterbacks at the end. Because I would say, look, if you need a quarterback, Ryan Tannehill will be up there. I think he's getting a franchise tag. Byron Jones, do you have a place you'd want him to go?
I think that's a good one. He should just stay in Dallas.
Should stay in Dallas.
Exactly, yeah.
Right?
That's kind of
no, I'm with you.
That's a good one there.
I'm with you firmly. Okay. At number 2, I'm going to take Amari Cooper. I actually think Amari Cooper should be 1. And the ideal place for Amari Cooper is Dallas as well. However,
Ravens.
If he has to go somewhere else, the Ravens, the Patriots, a couple of places that I would love to see Amari Cooper go. And this is so interesting because the first 2 guys we talked about are Cowboys. So are they going to overspend for these guys? Are they going to try and be lean, kind of cheap and not take one of them? Obviously, both of them are very good. So it'll be interesting. Number 3, since we're doing a little snake draft here, I'm going to stick with wide receivers, I thought you were going to take Amari Cooper, in which case I would have taken Byron Jones here. But I'm going to go with A.J. Green.
Okay.
And I would put A.J. Green ahead of Amari Cooper if it weren't for the injury concern. But because of the injury concern, I actually think it makes him potentially a little bit bigger of a bargain. You're going to have to give Amari Cooper, you would think a lot more of an investment. And this is the guy that I would love to see go to the Patriots because they're a little bit of an older team. And I think he would probably value the opportunity, having lived in Cincinnati for his entire life or pro career, to compete for a championship. Both of these guys offer a team the threat of the big play. They're not just good receivers in the intermediate. They're not just guys that can make plays after the catch, but both Amari and A.J. Green can get downfield. And you're seeing like Titans and Chiefs, right? What can they do? They can get downfield.
Absolutely. So, and that's great. And I think when you look at sort of like receivers and we look at defensive backs, there are types that matter, right? So Cooper, I think, is a good opportunity for the Ravens because he's explosive and that offense wants to be explosive, but he can also sort of fill in that underneath role that they so lacked. A.J. Green's another one where I think he can sort of do both, and that offense lacked a lot of explosiveness, but it also lacked a reliable big receiver that can get open underneath. So that's a good pick.
Well, that's what I would rather go Amari to the Ravens and A.J. Green to the Patriots, because what the Patriots really missed was that deep speed. And if A.J. Green's healthy, that's what he provides. Okay, you're up twice.
Okay. All right. Let me look at. I'm going to stick in the defensive backfield here. I'm going to go because of age, and also I think the ability to sort of do a bunch of things. I'm going to go with Anthony Harris.
I like it.
I think Anthony Harris. So I'm talking about safeties the other day with Solomon Wilcots, and it was like this idea of like safeties are great because the bust factor is so much lower than other positions. Because if a guy is a pretty good deep safety, and he can sort of like play, he can play that role, right? And Trey Boston's played that role for a long time. If you're Tyrann Mathieu, his initial plan was to be a deep safety in Kansas City, but then there were injuries to the slot corner position. He's been playing sort of both up front and in back. That's been there's just so many ways you can go right with a safety, and relatively few ways you can go wrong. So that I like that one.
And you want him to stay in Minnesota, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, he should. I honestly think, and like Vikings fans might give me flack for this, but I think if you're a Vikings fan and you have to choose between the two, I think you keep Harris. And, Harris, you allow Harrison Smith's reputation to garner trade value on the open market because that team doesn't have any corners going into next year, and they need them. So Harris should stay with Minnesota, but, they don't have any cap room.
It's going to be interesting. That team could go a lot of different ways.
But,
very interesting. Okay. You are up again.
Yeah, and then it's Chris Harris, right? And Chris Harris, again, corner's not as there's more risk associated with corner than safety, because if you're a corner, you can either play outside or inside, and there's not a lot of the positions are so much different that oftentimes you try to cast an outside guy as an inside guy, or as the Broncos did this past season, an inside guy as an outside guy, and you can get things to happen that are not quite as robust, right? And Harris didn't have as good of a year this year. A lot of that has to do with sort of where he played. I
like it.
Trying to think of a team for him. This sounds silly, but I think that they'll probably do it. But I think a team like Houston could really use him.
I was gonna say Houston, but the team you were just talking about, why wouldn't the Vikings be?
Well, the Vikings wouldn't do it because they literally have almost no. Like, the problem is, I don't think the Vikings.
I get that they can't do it.
Yeah,
but wouldn't that be awesome?
For sure. He'd be a very good slot corner.
I think I think Zimmer would use that talent as probably as good as anyone would. He also seems like a guy that's perfect for the Patriots because he's so flexible, and that's exactly what the Patriots defense wants to do. Is they want to take guys and just script the game plan based on each game and the difference in opponent. But I'm going to move on here, and I'm going to go. I'm going to stick with the passing game. This is going to shock everyone. I'm deciding between a couple of receivers here, and I think Robbie Anderson is someone that people are interested in, but I would rather have Emmanuel Sanders. And the reason I would rather have Emmanuel Sanders, even though he's older, is that I feel a little bit better about him as a teammate and as I have a bigger sample of Emmanuel Sanders doing the right thing, and that matters to me. I honestly don't know why I wouldn't want him to stay with the Niners once again, but he's another guy that I think could be super valuable on the Ravens. I think could be super valuable on the Patriots. Even though the Patriots probably want a guy that's a little bigger, more of a downfield guy, there's no doubt that they could use him. He gets open.
Emmanuel Sanders is what they wanted out of Mohamed Sanu and just never got.
Oh, that's the thing.
And Sanders can play inside, outside. Sanu did not have that flexibility at this stage in his career. Edelman did not have that flexibility. So I like that.
Let me give you one more. And this probably can't happen either, but the Packers.
Yeah, the Packers have set themselves up okay. But yes, Adams is a player that we saw is every bit a top talent, in this league still. And
they just need.
Yeah.
They've been trying to build, another set of receivers akin to the Nelson, Cobb, Adams trio through the draft, and they just haven't been able to. I think he would be a nice compliment. And then I'm not going to take Robbie Anderson. I'm actually going to take Justin Simmons, who was probably one of the biggest snubs in the whole Pro Bowl.
The All-Pro voters certainly have a nice gig because if they mess up, the Pro Bowl messes up, they are able to get the guy into All-Pro like Eric Kendricks and Justin Simmons, at least second team.
And the reason that, he obviously goes well below Harris is there's just we don't know as much about him, obviously. He's had one really good season, but he's only 26, and he just made a ton of big plays on the ball. He was able to play in the slot. He was able to play in the box. He was able to play deep, and that flexibility is awesome. If I'm the Broncos, I don't know why you wouldn't try and keep this guy.
Yeah. It's a very good point. And their defense was not the reason they sucked this year. And in fact, they weren't even that bad. They were 7-9, despite starting 0-4 and starting 3 quarterbacks during the season. Okay, for me, I'm going to go a little bit bigger here, just because again, I think that I've sufficiently stocked up the defensive backfield. I'm going to go with Corey Littleton, who is quietly one of the best linebackers in the NFL, and somebody, as we talked about on the 2-minute drill yesterday, somebody who can, I think be a linebacker that I'm willing to buy into because of his ability, his range, his ability to make plays in space. He's a decent pass rusher. So, the issue is as people have written about, his run defense grade is not great, but run defense doesn't matter all that much. It's more of a product of the players in front of you. So
look at you being diplomatic with your use of does not matter.
And so I like him as a linebacker there. I'm trying to think of the teams that could really use one. Team like Kansas City would come to my mind. Anthony Hitchens has been a disappointment. They traded for former first-round pick Darren Lee, who's now been a healthy scratch in a number of games for them from the Jets. He'd be terrific.
I like it.
And then I'm going to go with Hunter Henry, the tight end from the Los Angeles Chargers of Anaheim. If he returns to the Chargers in 2020, he may be catching passes from Tom Brady. But I think anybody, he's going to be undervalued because of his lack of production, because of his injuries. But generally speaking, tight ends tend to age later. We see some of the better years from tight ends once they get into their second, deal, and oftentimes it's with different teams. And he could be a guy that, for example, the Patriots go after if they want to keep Brady and sort of build an offense around a tight end again. Interesting.
The reason I didn't take Hunter Henry earlier is that just to me, there's so much value in the draft. You look at a guy like George Kittle, who was, fifth round pick. All right. I am going to take Robbie Anderson, because of the value at the receiver position, and he's a guy that can get downfield, and that's super valuable. And I don't know why the Jets honestly wouldn't try to keep him, but he's another guy who, in my opinion, the Patriots could leverage because he can get downfield, and that's something they obviously don't have. I keep putting receivers on the Patriots, but I think that makes a ton of sense. And then with the last pick, or no, that was the last pick.
Yeah, that was the last pick.
All right.
I think the reason Robbie Anderson doesn't stay with the Jets is because, much like somebody like Brad Childress used to be the coach for Minnesota, there are some coaches who think that their schemes are just supersede players and can't tell the difference between a guy as talented as Robbie Anderson and a guy who's not as talented as Robbie Anderson.
True.
So he might just let him go because he thinks he can plug and play anybody into that scheme.
I like it. You want to talk quarterbacks real quick? Free agent quarterbacks?
Sure.
Tell me the place, because there's a ton of them. I mean, we assume Drew Brees is coming back to the Saints, but then you've obviously got Brady, you've got Bridgewater, you've got Tannehill, you got your boy Flamus. Put one on one team.
Wow. That's a good one. Let me put Bridgewater on the Bears.
Ooh. I was going to put Bridgewater on the Colts.
Okay. Now, with Joe Brady in place in Carolina, I don't want to kill Cam Newton's legacy there. My hope is that they give him 1 year, right? Very similar to how we've seen sort of other coaches give incumbent quarterbacks a year. But who's a quarterback that wouldn't succeed under Joe Brady?
I don't know, because Joe Brady is probably going to, he's going to run a lot of the stuff that he learned from his time at the Saints.
Yeah.
Obviously, that was successful at LSU. And all of those tenets of that offense are going to work great in the NFL. The question is, the guys that have always succeeded in that system, Joe Burrow was incredibly accurate. Drew Brees was incredibly accurate. The one thing that Cam Newton doesn't have is that pinpoint accuracy.
Yep.
And so my question with the Joe Brady thing, and to be fair, so I went on Carolina radio the morning that he was signed. They're like, what do you think about Joe Brady? I was like, what do you mean? There's no chance you're going to get this guy. Because I had heard the day before that teams had inquired about him as an OC and were told, you've got no shot. And I said I told him on the radio, I was like, I would have signed this guy yesterday if I could, but I don't think you can. So it's no brainer for me in terms of signing him. The question is, and I think the answer is yes, but the question is, depending on what quarterback he has there, and if it's Cam Newton, does he try to make him do the things Joe Burrow does? Because I don't think so, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think Joe Burrow's got good athleticism, accurate but not great arm, and he, in some sense, he does take hits the way that Cam does, but Cam is different as a thrower, and which is why I don't even think Jameis would be a good threat there. I do think somebody like Bridgewater, somebody who has like sort of more of a I wouldn't say a noodle, but somebody who is more of an accurate but not terrific downfield player. The thing that Carolina has that LSU had is guys that can catch the ball and make plays after the catch. Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson for LSU, but then you look at Carolina, you have Samuel and you have DJ Moore. DJ Moore, one of the better young receivers in the NFL, a good tight end in Greg Olsen should he return, and obviously McCaffrey out of the backfield. I think it sets up pretty nicely for them.
It does. I have one other scenario that I want to float by you that I think is kind of crazy. So the Saints had a kind of ugly finish to the season. Taysom Hill probably should have played more. I think it's a lot of smoke, but Sean Payton loves Taysom Hill. He loves Taysom Hill. Okay. So let's say Teddy goes somewhere else, maybe the Colts or the Panthers. And let's say that Phillip Rivers is not going back to the Chargers. And maybe things get a little frosty in New Orleans, and they decide, we kind of want to go with Taysom Hill, the next Steve Young.
Breeze goes back to the Chargers,
back to Cali, and goes back to the Chargers.
Finishes what he started there.
I don't. I mean, it's obviously a long shot, but it's just a scenario that I think would be interesting. It's way more interesting to me than Brady because I just don't see any way that Brady finds. There's no way Brady takes a step down from an organizational standpoint. I just can't see that happening. And the only place that has a good enough reputation from a team building standpoint and a culture, I think, is the Colts. But I can't. We've been to Indianapolis. There's no way that dude is going to Indianapolis. Are you kidding me?
I feel
you
like
know how many almonds they have even in Indianapolis? You can't find an almond and an avocado within a 1 mile radius of each other.
It's only 2 hours from Cincinnati, which is a
Right.
hotbed of culture and all that kind of stuff.
Any other crazy scenarios that you've got?
No, what I'm
Case
interested
Keenum back to Minnesota.
What I'm interested in is what trades might be, because at this time last year there was the whole we didn't sign Odell to trade him, and then he's traded a few months later.
Do you think the Browns traded for him to trade him?
That's a good question. Yeah. So like, who would be like a player who might get traded this offseason that like it would blow us out of the water right now? Like Zeke?
No, Zeke's going nowhere.
McCarthy's never been a bell cow back coach, though.
It ain't about McCarthy. That one ain't about McCarthy. When McCarthy spent the night at Jerry Jones' house and they were having their after dinner milk and cookies.
The rub and tug.
Yeah, Jerry said, "Listen, Mike, there's a couple of ground rules here. The first is
you get a running back.
You turn over the files when you leave.
Yeah.
All recordings are mine to own and keep.
And you
keep Zeke in the backfield.
Keep Zeke.
No.
He let DeMarco Murray go, right?
There's a difference, though, man. There's a big difference. Well, we're going to talk about the 2016 draft. Let's talk about it right now. I will say the one guy that I think could be traded, though, is actually Odell. I could totally see that happening, just because. I mean, it just doesn't seem to be a great fit. I don't know. I love Odell as a player. It's just there's a lot of things that continue. Like he just continues to put himself in the news. The LSU thing is a great example. People are talking about the cash thing and all that. The only thing that I come back to is with that, why are you doing it on the field? That to me says that you want the attention that comes with it. And you should know that it's probably not going to be great attention. And it's not like you're making a statement about, freedom of speech or anything, really. So that to me is the concerning piece. Anyways, let's move on to the 2016 draft. So let's read. I'm going to read through the top 10 from the 2016 draft. And I want your take on it. And then we're going to spin it forward. What are we learning from the 2016 draft about this year's draft? With the first pick, the Rams took Jared Goff. With the second pick, the Eagles took Carson Wentz. Now, the interesting thing about that is both those teams traded, to select those players. With the third pick, the then San Diego Chargers took Joey Bosa, an Ohio State edge defender. With the fourth pick, the Dallas Cowboys selected your boy, Fat Zeke from Ohio State. With the fifth pick, the Jaguars lucked into Jalen Ramsey, no longer on the team. With the sixth pick, the Baltimore Ravens took maybe the best tackle in the NFL right now, Ronnie Stanley. With the seventh pick, the 49ers took DeForest Buckner. With the eighth pick, the Titans took Jack Conklin. With the ninth pick, the Bears took Leonard Floyd. And with the 10th pick, the Giants took Eli Apple. And I'll just mention the 11th pick because the Bucs took Vernon Hargreaves. And you're probably going to mention the Bucs here in your reaction to this draft.
So I wrote an article for the site. I think it goes up tomorrow. Basically looking at what you would expect from a WAR perspective for each pick and how teams did relative to that in some. So giving a little bit of credit to teams that had a lot of picks as long as they were decent, and players that overcame expectations. Now, the hard part about this is that quarterbacks are generally speaking worth 3 or 4 times more value of contract more than a position player. And so it's clear, you read that off, it's clear the Rams and the Eagles and eventually the Cowboys won this draft because they were able to draft their franchise quarterback. The Eagles and Rams able to take those quarterbacks to the Super Bowl, Eagles winning a Super Bowl. So we're going to throw those players out because let's and And, to some degree, you throw Denver out of there, too, because they drafted Paxton Lynch in the bottom half of the first round. He was cheeks, right? And then you had Christian Hackenberg by the Jets. So in some sense, you throw all those things out.
Really just called him cheeks on the podcast. I just have a real hard time saying that cheeks has a negative connotation.
That's true. Okay. So looking at this, I sort of, you go through and rank them. It's a really interesting insight. So, and we're not going to go through the whole ranking. You have to go to the website. But the top 4 teams are really interesting, right? Top 4 teams are New Orleans, Kansas City, Atlanta, and Tennessee. A couple things here, right? The interesting thing with New Orleans is you talked about Sheldon Rankins was their top pick, and he's a good football player. But their second pick is really what elevated them here. Michael Thomas, a wide receiver, worth about 4/5 of a win this year. And he was drafted after Josh Doxson. He was drafted after Corey Coleman. He was drafted after Laquan Treadwell. And, has ended up, overcoming all of those players probably combined to be that type of player. So.
No, so I have 2 takeaways from this that I'm spinning forward into looking at this draft. The first is trade down unless you need a quarterback. And the Saints are the example of that. Mm-hmm. You just don't know enough about these players to think you're so smart that you should trade away draft picks that give you an option to take more players for drafting one player that you feel way more certain about. Because this massive amount of data of all these draft picks says you actually don't know. So that's my first takeaway. The second takeaway that I have is when there are good quarterbacks in the draft, people are going to go get them.
Yep.
And so as I look at the top 5 in this draft, the Bengals are going to take Joe Burrow. Mm-hmm. If they don't take Joe Burrow, they're going to take Justin Herbert.
Yeah.
Okay? I'm just telling you right now.
Yeah.
That's the guy that for some uncanny, weird reason is going to make them get really excited because of the way he throws in shorts, and they're going to make that move. But the second pick being with the Washington Redskins, I believe 100% that they should take Tua. It seems like he's going to throw in April, all those things. But I don't think they will.
No.
Because they believe in Dwayne Haskins, who, by the way, was a much lower pick last year. And so that opens the door for, I believe, a little bit of a bidding war between the Miami Dolphins and the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, and you'd hate to see it.
You absolutely would. And so I believe that quarterbacks are going to go 1-2 because I think Tua is that good that he deserves to be the second pick. And then all of a sudden you have this cascade effect where now Chase Young, who is, going to be, I think, a great edge defender, but isn't going to make the difference that a quarterback will, is going to slip a little bit. You've got Jeff Okudah, the great cornerback. And then who's the Zeke Elliott of this draft, right? Because if you're looking at the Cowboys right now and you go, man, if they just had Tony Pollard and Jalen Ramsey, they'd be a better team.
Or they would have drafted Jordan Howard in that same draft, as a 5th-round pick for the Bears.
I can't stress this enough. They would be a much better team right now, and they'd have more cap flexibility.
Yeah. Speaking of trading down, right, the Chiefs are second on this list. They traded out of the first round and to accumulate picks. And the great thing was, so they had a 2nd-round pick. Their top pick was Chris Jones. Their 3rd-round pick was Kyver Russell, who didn't even make it to week 3. They cut him 3 weeks into the season. But they have 3 4th-round picks, 2 5th-round picks, 2 6th-round picks. One of their 3 4th-round picks was Demarcus Robinson, who's a receiver that contributes for them. One of their 5th-round picks was Tyreek Hill. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? So, again, looking at this order here, taking shots at important positions. They also drafted Kevin Hogan, who's a quarterback from Stanford. Didn't work out for them. But, they're taking shots at valuable positions. Some of them don't work out in the Russell, a cornerback from Notre Dame. 2 wide receivers work out, one of them in a bang-up way. And probably why, since this draft, they've won 4 consecutive AFC West titles. Atlanta, similarly, right, you look at them, they drafted Keanu Neal in the 1st round. Coverage player, Deion Jones, coverage linebacker, Austin Hooper, a tight end who's going to hit free agency and be pretty sought after, and then Devondre Campbell, a coverage linebacker. Now, they haven't had the type of team success in many reasons because a lot of these guys have been hurt sometimes, but they still made it to the Super Bowl in 2016 with a lot of these guys contributing. 2017, they made it to the 2nd round of the playoffs. Again, a good draft. And lastly, Tennessee sort of showing it may not be about the valuable players. It might just be a huge collection of players, half of whom become starters. They've been 9-7 every single season since this draft. Jack Conklin, Derrick Henry, Kevin Bayard, Tajay Sharp, LaShawn Sims, all guys that contribute for them. So, just a different way in which you sort of look at drafts and say, like, how do you win? You win by kind of like taking a lot of shots in the dark, and some fail, some don't, and the ones that really hit are the ones that carry you.
I agree. You couldn't have said it better. My top 5 picks. Here's how I think the top 5 in this draft go. Joe Burrow, trade up for Tua. The Detroit Lions stay at 3. They take Chase Young, who is great, but their coverage goes to crap in a couple of years, so it ultimately doesn't matter as much. Number 4, by the way, you should go check out Mike's mock draft. It's a little different than this. Number 4, this is my favorite pick of everything. CeeDee Lamb goes to New York. Daniel Jones elevates himself into Jameis territory where he's just going 30-30 every year, but CeeDee Lamb is a monster in that offense. And then at number 5, I can't imagine the Dolphins lose that bidding war for Tua, but if they do and they're stuck at 5, I think they probably pull the trigger on your boy Herbs.
Yeah,
which would be crazy. I would trade down in that spot, or take maybe an Isaiah Simmons or Jerry Jeudy or something.
You explain it well. If you are at that position, a trade down is probably the best. If you have to take a player there, quarterback's not a terrible one. It's just that these particular quarterbacks, may not be the strongest. Now,
big drop off.
Some things to learn from the bottom half of this group, right? The bottom 5 drafts in 2016, 28 was Seattle. I said that for better or worse, they yielded 2 starters along the offensive line in Jermaine Ifedi and Joey Hunt. What it shows is that if you have a quarterback, not much matters, with Seattle. Indianapolis, this was the last pre-Chris Ballard draft. Again, they drafted 4 offensive linemen, only 1 plays for them anymore. Cleveland had a lot of picks, and most of them sucked. San Francisco, again, a team that's on the doorstep of the Super Bowl right now. This was, again, their last pre-John Lynch draft, showing, again, that if you resolve the quarterback position, you get the head coach being good, and you value the right things, you can overcome terrible drafts. In their draft, they drafted Joshua Garnett in the first round, Will Redmond in the third, Rashard Robinson, they traded like immediately after.
Is the reason that you're extending this conversation just to talk to me about this Niners draft?
No, because I'm saying that you can overcome it. And then lastly, the Stone Woat draft, which is Tampa Bay, drafted, as you said, Vernon Hargreaves at 11, traded up in the second round for Roberto Aguayo.
What's a real world analogy for trading up to draft Roberto Aguayo? Because I have one.
Paying $100,000 for a beat up car.
Okay. I was in Vegas last week, as you know, and I'm walking through the shops at the Aria. And first off, these are hilarious because it's just really expensive shop after really expensive shop because they want the whales to come spend all their money. And there's a brand called Balenciaga. You familiar?
Nope.
Okay. It's a really expensive brand that makes some interesting looking stuff. They have, no joke, what is a dead stone cold copy of swim shoes with a Balenciaga written across it for $600, $700 or whatever. And I was just thinking to myself, I was like, that's probably the biggest waste of, it's like you bring would you rather have these swim shoes or these swim shoes that are $800 more? You're like, give me those.
Give me the Aguayo swim shoes. So
give me the Aguayos.
I think this is great, and it's good to put this into perspective. There are 0 drafts in the history of the league other than taking a QB, right, where your franchise is going to be defined by that draft. So as we lead up to draft season, it's a fun time. It's a great time. But if your team happens to trade out of a pick you really wanted, it's not the end of the world. Or if your team drafts somebody that you don't like, not the end of the world. Or on the flip side, if they take a player that you absolutely love, there's no guarantee it's going to turn out the way that you think.
We're on to the conference championship. You ready?
Let's go.
All right. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is, let's say you're sitting here right now. Actually, a buddy of mine texted me during the divisional games. He was like, is anyone good to bet on to win the Super Bowl right now?
Yes.
And we have talked about this a lot over the past couple of weeks. Who would let's look forward in the future. But right now, looking forward in the future, isn't that far down the road. And so the prices on futures right now don't make sense because you're not waiting that long.
Yep.
So you're better off just saying, let me bet a little now and let me bet a little on the Super Bowl.
Yeah, there's not a ton of value in the favorites right now. And in the underdogs, it's like, yes, there's not, like we would make Green Bay more like plus 400, where, if you look at Bet Online, they're plus 700. Tennessee, similarly, you have them at plus 562. They're plus 750. But, we do this calculation. We go to PFF.com. Basically, if you just do like a mechanical parlay where you roll it over, you actually get a lot more value on both of these underdogs than not. And you give yourself the freedom in this case, right? There's not going to be, and this is why futures are often valuable, there's not going to be anything that happens in the next week that's going to alter the course of this schedule to a point where having that option now is going to be all that much more worth it. We calculated, for example, with Green Bay, for the money line rollover to work, the Chiefs just have to beat the Titans more than 4% of the time. So it's like,
I don't know.
Yeah.
Derrick Henry's been really
like if Matt
well.
Moore were to face Tennessee this weekend.
Oh, yeah.
It would be more. They'd have obviously a much more than 4% chance to win. They might even be. I don't think they'd be favored. But
here's the big takeaway that I have from this, which is if you didn't do this year, think about this for next year.
Yep.
This is why you bet futures ahead of time.
Yep.
Because right now, here's the situation I'm in. I had Super Bowl futures on the Niners and the Chiefs.
Mm-hmm.
I also had the Saints. I believe I had the Falcons. But
of course you did.
Right, of course. But I'm sitting in a really great spot because the two favorites to go to the Super Bowl, I have great odds.
And you have them, yes, far better odds than they currently are.
Far better. So now what I'm doing is I'm looking to hedge in particular games, and I can so I can get value on a Green Bay money line as a hedge for my, for one of my bets basically.
Mm-hmm.
But also if I win that, I'm getting essentially this better than current future value bet because I can roll it over and also be hedging in all likelihood against the Chiefs.
You end up in a situation where you aren't hedging out of necessity, but instead hedging out of that there's actually value, because you shouldn't hedge unless like your financial situation is such that you need the money. You should never hedge a bet unless the bet that you're about to place has positive expected value. So, the only reason you would, for example, if you had LSU, this past week at a good price for a future, the only way you would have bet Clemson is if you actually liked them.
Yep.
If you had Clemson like we did, you would not have bet LSU to hedge because the LSU minus 60, I don't care if they won or not, was a bad bet. So like you just take your lumps, right? You don't put a negative EV thing to hedge your bet off. And the same thing's true. Like we are not that high on Green Bay, but we do think the spread in Sunday's game is a bit high, right? So, and I don't even think that the money line is all that great of a bet so much as literally the point spread, because there's a significant fraction you could win the San Francisco future and win the point spread bet with Green Bay. That's great. That's a great position to be in.
Okay. So we've got Green Bay going back to San Francisco, 7.5 point underdog, which is very interesting because Minnesota was a 7-point underdog, obviously got, their doors kicked in.
Yep.
And the first question that I ask myself is, okay, I think Aaron Rodgers is a better quarterback than Jimmy Garoppolo. Now,
yep.
Say what you will about family relationships, about ability to trim their beard.
Unbelievable.
About choices in significant others. Put that all aside. I think Aaron Rodgers on the football field is the guy I'd rather have. But I'd rather have the San Francisco offense.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather have the environment on offense that the Niners have. So the question to me is I know how important the quarterback is. Am I overrating it because actually the result of what he does is much less for the Packers than it is for the Niners? And is that worth me being scared off of 7.5?
Yeah, I don't. I mean, there's a significant issue with the Packers offense, which is that they have one guy to throw to, and possibly 1.5 if you count Jimmy Graham. And the 49ers, unlike Seattle, are going to take full advantage of that. And
do you think they can? Do you think the Seahawks can cut Ugo Amadi in time for the Niners to get him to put him in the slot on the most important down against the only player?
You're giving me PTSD.
The only player that the Packers have thrown to all game.
You're giving me PTSD, right? And
less than 100 coverage snaps. He's 5'2".
He's 5'2", and all Rodgers had to do was,
great throw.
But the Niners did a great job of suffocating. Rodgers in that game. It took until the 5th offensive possession for the Packers to have more than one successful play on a drive in that game. So they were, and there were a lot of things that could have gone either way, but ultimately San Francisco, buried the Packers in that game. I thought that Jimmy G played fine. He made enough throws. He wasn't perfect. And that's really, if you're backing the Packers here, you have to bank on the fact that at times Jimmy G, when he faces pressure or is in a big situation, he does not necessarily give you the accuracy. He does not necessarily give you the safety that you need to be a, more than a touchdown favorite.
Okay. If Jimmy G throws a ball right at a linebacker, do the Niners are the Niners covering this? Because he did that twice against Minnesota, and they covered easily. And the question that I have is, like, can he still get away with that and they cover? Or if he does that and he does it once, does that mean you feel great about the Packers covering 7.5?
I don't know. Because I think Minnesota was like next level inept the other day, and I think if you run the game back, they probably cover the spread 54% of the time or more, but ultimately it didn't work that time. So I don't know. I think it significantly enhances your opportunity, and I think that the Packers will have a better opportunity to move the ball. There was a lot of like sequencing things that caused them to have issues in the first matchup. I don't think will be the case now. So I don't know. I don't think Jimmy G is. I think Jimmy G's environment puts him on par with Rodgers, but Rodgers' ceiling is significant here and something you have to take into consideration.
I agree. That game against San Francisco was a clinic as far as all the things that scare you about the Packers offense came to fruition. They just don't have anyone other than Davante Adams who is winning consistently. And the Niners are in a pretty good situation to actually not put Ugo Amadi out there on Davante Adams and therefore make Aaron Rodgers hold on to the ball longer and not be able to put the ball where he wants to, in which case they can take him down. What was interesting about that game was he was only under pressure on 14 of 41 dropbacks, but the Niners had 25 pressures. So what that tells you is, okay, when they did get pressure, it was kind of wholesale
all over him,
right? And they sacked him 7 times, I believe, and that's the type of thing that if he's going to hold on to the ball for that long, he's not going to be able to get it out of his hands quickly. And he was able to do that against Seattle, and when he held on to it for a while, guys were coming open. That's what worries you about it. At 7.5, though.
Here's the thing. If you just look at the way that things have played out over the past few weeks, San Francisco 3.5-point favorites in Seattle. Even if you liberally give out a 3.5-point home field advantage to Seattle, that would imply that San Francisco 7 points better than Seattle. Green Bay was 3.5 or 4.5-point favorites closing line last week. Even if you liberally give a point to home field or to a bye in the playoffs and 3.5-point home field advantage, that would put Seattle and Green Bay on par with each other. So that number at most, in my opinion, should be about 7, and that's kind of where we have it. 7.5 gives you that, plus the key number of 7 there. So I just think from a pure numbers perspective, we're going to talk about the teaser in a second here. From a pure numbers perspective, you're just making a good bet if you bet Green Bay.
Here are all the things that I'm adding up. I do believe that Jimmy G, true to himself, makes some great throws, but also throws at least
plus
one.
George Kittle is injured. Like he's not as he'll probably play and he'll probably be effective, but there's a significant chance that he's just not the best tight end in league history on Sunday.
Okay, agree to disagree. I think Jimmy G throws one to a linebacker. The second thing is we overvalue the Niners' home field advantage, particularly against the Packers. I think it will be no more exacerbated than it will be in this game. So I don't believe they should be getting the full home field. And then the last thing is that the Packers are a talented team, just like the Niners are. And in games like this, you talk about this the other day, which is like superstars matter. And they have superstars at the right positions. Mm-hmm. And so while the Niners are a better team, the Packers have, I think, just as many superstars that can make a huge play in this game and turn it around. So 7.5, I will be taking the Packers.
Yeah. Awesome. So here's another question. So we like that. We like that pick, quite a bit.
Do you want to move on? Are you ready to talk about your Chiefs?
Sure. Yeah. Let's talk about Kansas City.
Have you packed yet?
Nope.
You haven't?
No.
Do you know what the weather's going to be like?
I think I can get there. Hold on.
So while you're checking, I'm flying to DC this week, and it was 70 there last Saturday. It's going to be like 32 this
22
Saturday.
with 11-mile-per-hour winds. Now I will be I will be in a suite, so I think I'm good.
Poor guy. Okay, so this one, is it now 7?
It is 7. It's been bet down a little bit.
Bet down, and this surprises me a little bit. Does it surprise you?
Yeah. The thing about it is the Chiefs finished as a 5-point favorite in Tennessee the last time they played. Now that was the Chiefs' last loss, and so if you add the 6 points for home field advantage, we'd be back at 11 now. And now we're seeing 4. So have these numbers adjusted 4 points? I think there's a lot of overreaction to Tennessee beating a Baltimore team that many thought was the league's best.
Let me say this. So the last time Tennessee and Kansas City played was when Pat Mahomes had just come back from injury. And Mahomes was awesome. Mm-hmm. Over 8 yards per attempt from a clean pocket. He made that incredible jump pass. I believe it was to Hardman. And I think he took it and made it like 30-22 or something like that.
Yep.
He was awesome. So was Ryan Tannehill. But here's the difference between these two guys. Ryan Tannehill in that game, I have it here. Ryan Tannehill in that game, he threw, 15 passes? 19 passes. Ryan Tannehill has not yet had to be a volume thrower of the football. He hasn't had to drop back much in these playoffs. I don't think you can. The way that the Chiefs play the game of football, you're going to have to drop back and throw the ball. Mm-hmm. And as we talked about with Ryan Tannehill, he takes sacks at the highest rate in the league. Do you know who takes it at one of the lowest rates? Pat Mahomes.
Yeah,
which is so. It's what makes him. We talked about when you drafted quarterbacks. The difference between Pat Mahomes and Russell Wilson isn't the high end of variance. They can both make amazing plays. It's that Mahomes just refuses to make negative ones. Mm-hmm. The dude is supremely accurate from a clean pocket. He scrambles, he takes hits, but he does not take sacks. And to me, that is the difference in this game. When you increase the volume, I have supreme confidence in Mahomes to continue making plays. With Tannehill, he's been good at, okay, I only have to throw 4 deep shots and 5 other passes, and they only have to be over the middle off play action. Great. When that isn't possible, I have a lot more confidence in Mahomes. I actually think at 7, I would lean towards the Chiefs. Mm-hmm. But I think my favorite bet here is the over.
Yeah, and we've actually seen this tick down a little bit. It went up, as the week started, all the way up to 53. From 51.5 is where I see it on Monday. It's all the way up to 53. I see it some places now at 52.5, which you can get. You're over the key number of 51 at this point, so really you're not making a numbers play as much as you're making the Chiefs offense is the 3rd most efficient in the NFL since Tannehill took over. Titans are 2nd highest.
You said Chiefs, but you meant Titans.
No, Chiefs are 3rd, Titans are 2nd. So in the
you're looking at the Chiefs since Tannehill took over,
yeah,
which is an interesting way to look at it.
Well, so it goes Baltimore, Tennessee, Kansas City during the stretch of time when every team had their starting quarterback, and so these are 2 great offenses in the NFL from that perspective. So you're looking at it that way. I don't hate it at all. When I look at the ways in which Kansas City can win here. The Titans don't really have, like, if the Titans want to clamp down on the tight end in Kelsey after last week, much in the way that they did against Mark Andrews, we're going to see a lot of plays from Hill and Watkins. If they try to, do what the Texans did and, shut down Hill, you're going to see Kelsey. Damian Williams scored 3 touchdowns again for the second consecutive postseason game for him. Like, they just come at you in so many different ways. And the thing we've always talked about with the Titans, which I think will hold true here, is they can't rush the passer.
Can't rush the passer. They have a really below average set of talent on the defensive side of the ball, which has yet to be exposed because they've gotten out to these big leads. And here with Kansas City, I just think all of those guys are going to be able to make plays. And Andy Reid, I want so badly for Andy Reid to make this happen. But I really believe what you said the other day, which is maybe it's clicked for Andy. Because when they started scoring, they didn't stop. They just kept throwing the ball. And part of it is that to their own benefit, they suck at running the ball.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter. They ran play action left and right in that game. It does not matter.
Yep.
It gives Mahomes an extra 0.2 of a second. That's bad for the opposing team. If Mahomes gets a 1/10 of a second more, right? Who cares if the linebackers get fooled? I don't.
Yep.
If you get one defensive lineman to be a beat slower, it's worth it.
Yeah.
Mahomes is going to roast you. And I think that Andy Reid is going to try and score 60 points in this game. What held them back against the Patriots, right? They just couldn't score enough. They can't leave it up to their defense. They just can't.
They just ran out of time in basically the last effort, right? And we've got after, we bet 2 Chiefs overs during the second half of the season. The first one was the LA Chargers Monday Night Football game that they took their foot off the pedal, right? They scored 24 in the first 3 quarters, none in the second half. They scored, and then the New England game was sort of the same thing. The game was going over at halftime. Once they got a comfortable enough lead, they sat on it, almost lost the football game. I think that the Houston game spooked Andy enough. I think losing to the Titans, not only this season, but also I believe the past 4 times they've played them will make it such that they, put the foot on the pedal. I don't think that they relent at all in this game. To me, the only question is whether the Titans can score enough.
It's not whether Derrick Henry can get over 180 yards.
No.
What's his prop at? What's his total? Do you know?
I haven't seen any available yet. Yeah.
What do you think it is? You think it's 100?
Oh, no. I think it's like 109.5. I think people are going to
just be.
Yeah. Unreal. It's going to be like the college football championship props were like for some of those players like Jefferson and Chase and all those guys.
Would you rather try to tackle Derrick Henry or Lamar Jackson?
Derrick Henry, because I'm not catching Lamar Jackson. Like, that's a dumb question, I could at least just dive at the guy's legs.
If you could sacrifice your ribs.
Yeah, I could dive at the guy's legs. He's not making me miss. He might run me over, but then there's also a chance that he trips.
That's what you're hoping for.
Yeah,
that's what you're hoping for. Okay, so we do need to pick a lock of the week here.
Yeah.
And it really comes down to, I think, Green Bay getting 7.5 or taking a teaser angle.
Yes, and I think that this is a good teaser week. Here's the thing. And we actually wrote up a worse teaser than this could be. Now that Kansas City's at -7, you can get them at -1 in the teaser. San Francisco can be teased down to 1.5. Here's the thing. The way that the betting markets are constructed, you don't even have to have really any insight on this game other than a knowledge of basic probability to find that this teaser has expected, value that's positive. Going into last night, we had Kansas City was -350, Tennessee was +280. Same thing for Green Bay and the San Francisco 49ers. So if you look at those, you use the implied probabilities, you take, let's say, a conservative route and say that 2% of NFL games land on 1. This is still over the 52.4% that you need to break even. Now, you add a little bit more context in the fact that Tennessee, Kansas City totals 53. Games that are over 53 don't land on 1 point very often. You can lower that and give yourself an even bigger edge. And games that are line 7.5 don't land on one very much either, right? These are not particularly low spreads. Like there's an edge there, and I do think and that's independent of any handicapping of how good the teams are. That's literally just using the market and teasing through key numbers of 7 and 3.
Okay, so here's my question: would you rather sit here and wait for both games to finish, or would you rather just have to sweat through the nightcap?
I kind of like the idea of being able to, I like the idea of being able to root for Kansas City because I think that they win this game.
Okay.
And then I like the kind of middle that we sort of have a situation here with Green Bay plus 7.5, and then the teaser leg, which would be San Francisco minus the 1.5. So I personally like the teaser because I think that both of these teams, I think San Francisco and Kansas City are significantly better than their counterparts. More than I like, because we've seen this Green Bay game happen before. Aaron Rodgers proves everybody wrong at 1 week. He's trash the next week, right?
Can I tell you something?
What's that?
I don't know if this is the fan in me. I don't think it is because I'm pretty good at divorcing myself from fandom. I would be very nervous.
Laying 1.5 with the Niners.
Just nervous about winning that game.
Yeah.
If I'm the Niners.
Okay.
I'm just terrified.
Okay.
There's so many ways that I think this game starts off where the Packers can get out to a lead. And similar, while I do think that the Niners are way better at potentially coming back and winning the game than, say, the Ravens are, I don't have that same faith that I do in the Chiefs or the Seahawks with Russell Wilson making that type of a comeback.
Yeah.
So that worries me. I'm nervous. So that's my pushback. But I do really like the fact that you're taking advantage of the market. Obviously, is good. I mean, it's really instructive. I don't know how many people are out there that don't kind of understand where this is coming from, but just thinking about the way that NFL games work out and I'll just go look at the differences in scores and it gives you a basic sense of why teasing from 7 down through a couple of key numbers and 4 and 3 and all the way down to 1 is useful. Just by the way that the scoring works.
And again, we're talking about very, very, very small differences between making a good bet and a bad bet. And so we've seen people, tease through. So let's say the spread is you have a 6-point teaser and you tease a game from let's say your team is minus 2.5 and you tease them all the way to plus 6 or plus 3.5. In a playoff game, there's a 0% chance the game ends on a zero.
Yep.
So you're sacrificing 1 point, which depending upon which point it is a percentage point at least, right? And when I say there's an edge here, I'm saying the break even, the percentage here is 52.8 somewhere to 53.8. That's not all that big, but it's drastic. If you take that down to 51.7 or something, you no longer are breaking even long term. And so you have to know, okay, when I tease through the 7, that's a significant amount of games, 7 to 10%, depending upon what you think it is. And then through 3, which is another, depending upon where the spread is, again, significant, talking about 5% of games. Now you're starting to accumulate value, and that's where this thing is. Not every point has.
Do you have any more to say?
Validity.
Do you have any more to say about it not being that big, but also being drastic at the same time?
Not being
I'm kidding, as a joke.
Nominally, yeah. Jeez.
All right, Super Bowl matchups. All right, wait. So we're going teaser.
I think we're going teaser. Yeah.
Cool. I'm with it. Tease them down. Kansas City you can get at -1. San Francisco down to 1.5, and start praying. Get on your knees and beg. All right. The one matchup that gives me anxiety is anyone versus Tennessee. Which is not a shot at Tennessee. It's just they're not as exciting of a team as the Kansas City Chiefs. as the San Francisco 49ers, as the Green Bay Packers. It's certainly not as exciting as the Kansas City Chiefs. So let's start with the Tennessee options. If Tennessee faces San Francisco, the look-ahead line is Tennessee +5.
Mm-hmm.
My gut there is to say I don't really understand why Tennessee would be getting fewer points than Green Bay in this situation. You know, like I get
Careful.
I get that it's in Miami, but you know, I think Niners fans will still travel way better than Titans fans, and like San Francisco's 60 miles away from Santa Clara anyways. Yeah. So that's my initial gut reaction there. Your thoughts on that matchup?
Yeah, I still can't see why Tennessee would be getting is all that significantly different than Green Bay. Yeah,
I would take San Francisco.
Yeah,
-5 in that situation.
Yep.
Okay, the other one, Green Bay, Tennessee. Tennessee, look ahead, would be getting 2.
I think you have to take the points of the Titans.
Really?
Yeah. I think that the Titans are just more explosive than the Packers. The Packers are, you know, obviously, I think the Packers are just more plain. And, you know, I think that, you know, Rodgers obviously has it in him to make consistent throws, and the defense is pretty good. But Tennessee can just Tennessee's offense is just more explosive than Green Bay's. And over the long haul, I think that, you know, getting points with a more explosive offense is worthwhile. And they're pretty good at scheming defense. Like we saw them last week scheme a pretty good defense for Lamar Jackson. You know, they gave up a lot of yards, but ultimately did not give up the crucial plays.
Yeah. But that was fluky, man.
Yeah, they schemed good defense.
Fluky. They got a dropped pass interception.
They schemed good defense against the Patriots. They've schemed, I don't know, they're not like,
here's the thing that
they're not talented defensively, but I do think they give themselves a chance.
Okay. Ryan Tannehill returning to the crime scene in Miami. In the Super Bowl, you're going to hear all week about experience.
Yeah.
But I do have faith in Aaron Rodgers not getting overwhelmed by the moment. Now, maybe the rest of his team does, and, you know, maybe Devontae Adams never gets open, and it's a disaster.
Mm-hmm.
But, again, I'm going to keep coming back to this. If both guys have to drop back 35 times, I just know more about Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, that's true. But like, is there an element to that that's, you know, more about, you know, sort of like the width of his distribution? Because, like, I think Tannehill can. I think the issue is if you're laying points and Tennessee has one of their offensive performances where they just boat race you, to me, like, that's a significant risk.
Okay, agree to disagree.
Who would you like? Tennessee's clearly Tennessee's an inferior team to San Francisco.
Yes,
but offensively, I think that their ceiling is similar to San Francisco's.
Stop it.
Not their average, but their ceiling.
Stop it. Let's move on. Green Bay, Kansas City. Kansas City, a 6-point favorite, is the look ahead here.
Biggest spread of the 4.
Biggest spread of the 4. And
rematch of Super Bowl 1.
And a rematch from this season when Mahomes did not play and Kansas City almost pulled it out with Matt Moore.
One of Rodgers' better games of the year.
Yeah. What's your gut reaction to -6?
I think you lay it with Kansas City. Yeah.
I'm on the same page.
Yeah.
I'm on the same page. It doesn't feel right because Aaron Rodgers is a legend, regardless of how you feel about whether he can shave his beard or not. But he was doing that on purpose, right?
He looked every bit the Wisconsin part.
I don't understand. I mean, you just can't. You're thinking about football so much that you can't.
Yeah.
Like, wash your face. I don't know. It's weird. I love Aaron Rodgers though. You know that.
Mm-hmm.
I've said that many times.
Yeah.
People seem to think I hate the Packers. I bet on Aaron Rodgers so many freaking times. It's ridiculous. All right. San Francisco, Kansas City. Kansas City favored by 2.5, as I believe predicted. Right, it would be less than 3.
Mm-hmm.
Give myself a pat on the back there. At 2.5, I would take Kansas City.
Yeah, as a both an emotional hedge.
Oh yeah.
And a hedge, like, literally, I guess. Yeah, I would take Kansas City. They're getting more because, again, the Chiefs will never be out of the game. The Niners defense, great as it is, will not matter against the Chiefs offense that good. And so you're going to ask Jimmy Garoppolo to outscore Patrick Mahomes, which is not a bet I want to make.
In fairness, that's not what you're doing. You're asking Kyle Shanahan
Kyle Shanahan and Jimmy Garoppolo to outscore Andy Reid and Pat Mahomes, which is still, I think, a mismatch, even though it does become closer when you add in Shanahan.
The cool thing about Shanahan, and also maybe to his own detriment, is that he's the cockiest mother on the planet.
Yeah.
This dude is. I love Kyle Shanahan. He can't talk. He can't go more than like 2 words without saying an F-bomb, which I love. And he's also a big Lil Wayne fan, which I also love. I just think Kyle Shanahan is cool. So Andy Reid is cool in that old football guy way.
Yeah.
Kyle Shanahan is the equal amount of coolness on the other side of the spectrum, just like the young football guy way. So I actually think it's not that big of a mismatch, but I would definitely take Kansas City -2.5 because that way I cannot lose, unless the Chiefs win by 1, which, as we just talked about, or Chiefs win by 2 or 1, which is probably not that likely. All right. Do you have any stories from Cincy Y for this week?
No, I think we went 0. My teams went 0-3 yesterday. So
On the court.
On the court, yeah. I thought I was decently shooting the 3, but I wasn't moving around great. I'm a little bit, I'm still recovering from the holidays, but I and then just bad passing, just a bad day yesterday playing basketball.
I have one story, and it's an unfortunate one.
Oh no!
I don't lock the locker in the Cincy Y. You're different. You just take your stuff with you. But I put my clothes in there. And I figure, look, if you're going to steal my clothes, like, may God have mercy on your soul.
Yeah. I
will hunt you down and I will mess you up. Well, not really. But I would ask the Y to close the doors and I would go search everyone. But that's never happened to me. But what I do is I put my AirPods case in my pant pocket.
Well, I forgot about this. Yes.
And someone stole my AirPods case out of my pant pocket. Now, I had my AirPods in my ears, so they ended up getting a case without the AirPods, which I believe is the far less valuable piece of equipment that they were looking for. And I just thought to myself, you must be so desperate to be in the Cincy Y going through lockers, taking people's AirPod cases. So I guess should I get a lock? Is that what I should do? Or should I just find a gym that is less raggedy?
No, I think you just get a bag. Like you have a small bag.
Right. And that's what I did is I got a new case and I put like a little silicone cover on it so that I can just throw it in my gym bag. But I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
I didn't realize, because I don't have AirPods, I didn't realize that the case had such power, but you're absolutely right. I mean,
what charges them?
Charges them.
So I've been walking around bumming charges off Austin. I've never felt more despondent and homeless. All right, we'll be back on Sunday night.
I'll be remote, but it'll be a lot of fun.
Hopefully you're somewhat sober.
I'll be sober.
No chance. You have no voice. You'd be hammered. Peace out, guys.